There are cases that go cold because evidence disappears. There are cases that go cold because witnesses lie. And then, there are cases that go cold for a far more disturbing reason. Because there is simply no one to suspect. No forced entry. No fingerprints. No DNA. No weapon. No motive. No enemies. No signs of struggle. Just a body. And the silence is so complete. It feels intentional. Tonight, we're looking at a murder that investigators still talk about in lowered voices. A case so clean, so untouched, that detectives began questioning not just what happened, but whether they were even looking at it the right way. This is the story of the Holloway case, and to this day, it has no suspects. On the surface, Daniel Holloway had the kind of life people quietly envied. 39 years old, architect, divorced, but amicable. No children. Lived alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside the city. The kind of place where mailmen wave, where neighbors know each other's dogs by name, where nothing ever happens. Daniel wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, he wasn't reckless, he was predictable. And that's important, because predictable people don't usually end up at the center of unsolvable murders. Every morning, Daniel left his house at 7:45 a.m. Every evening, he returned between 6:10 and 6:30 p.m. He jogged on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He ordered takeout on Fridays. He called his sister every Sunday. Routine, structure, normalcy. If someone had asked investigators, before the night of October 14th, whether Daniel Holloway was at risk of becoming a homicide victim, they would have laughed. October 14th was unremarkable. Daniel left work at 6:12 p.m. Security cameras captured him in the parking garage. He stopped at a grocery store at 6:28 p.m. He purchased pasta, a bottle of red wine, garlic bread, and laundry detergent. Nothing unusual. The cashier later described him as quiet but polite. He drove home. His car was seen entering the neighborhood at 6:47 p.m. And then, nothing. No outgoing calls, no messages, no signs of distress. At 9:14 p.m., Daniel's sister, Rebecca, tried to call him. It rang. No answer. That wasn't alarming. Not yet. At 10:32 p.m., she texted him again. Still, nothing. The next morning, Daniel didn't show up for work. That was the first red flag, because Daniel Holloway never missed work. By 2 p.m., his supervisor contacted Rebecca, and by 6:15 p.m., police were standing in front of Daniel's front door. What they walked into would follow them for the rest of their careers. The front door was locked. No damage. No forced entry. Officers knocked. No response. They entered using a spare key obtained from Rebecca. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The groceries were still on the kitchen counter, unpacked. The bottle of wine was unopened. Garlic bread still in its paper sleeve. Daniel lay in the living room, on his back, arms at his sides, as if placed there. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, no defensive wounds. Just a single, precise wound to the chest. Clean, controlled, almost surgical. The medical examiner would later determine the cause of death. A single stab wound directly between the ribs, piercing the heart. Instant, efficient, professional. But here's where it gets disturbing. There was no weapon found, no blood trail, no footprints, no fibers, no foreign DNA, nothing under his fingernails, nothing in the house that didn't belong there. It was as if whoever did this was never there at all. There was one detail that bothered investigators more than anything else. Daniel's alarm system was active, fully armed, and there were no alerts, no window breaks, no door openings, no system tampering. Meaning one of two things. Either Daniel let his killer in willingly, or the killer already had access. And that's where suspicion usually begins. Except in this case, there was no one to suspect. Investigators started where they always do. Who benefits? No life insurance policies beyond the ordinary. No recent disputes. No workplace conflicts. No lawsuits. No hidden debts. His ex-wife was remarried and lived 2 states away. Phone records showed no threats. No mysterious calls. No burner phones. Financial records were clean. No large withdrawals. No gambling. No secret accounts. His computer search history, architectural forums, recipe ideas, weather forecasts, painfully ordinary. Detectives interviewed neighbors. No arguments, no screaming, no strange vehicles. One neighbor reported seeing lights on around 8 p.m. That was it. Not a single witness placed anyone at that house, not one. And that's when the lead investigator reportedly said, "This feels less like a murder and more like an erasure." Weeks passed, then months, and something began to shift in the investigation. It wasn't that they lacked suspects, it was that they lacked possibilities. Every door they opened led to emptiness. Every theory collapsed under scrutiny. It wasn't just cold, it was sterile. And sterile crime scenes are rare, because humans make mistakes. We shed hair, we leave fibers, we smudge glass, we panic. But whoever killed Daniel Holloway left nothing behind. Which raises a terrifying question. Was this random, or was it practiced? When a killer leaves no trace, detectives fall back on one principle. If the crime scene is silent, the relationship won't be. Because statistically, most murders are not random. They're intimate, they're emotional, they're personal. So investigators began shrinking Daniel Holloway's world. Family first. His sister Rebecca had an airtight alibi. Phone records, GPS data, co-workers, security footage. His ex-wife, Marissa, 2 states away, remarried, verified timeline, no financial incentive. Friends? Daniel didn't have many. He had colleagues, he had acquaintances, but close friends? Very few. And that detail kept resurfacing, because Daniel was known as polite, but distant, kind, but private. No one described him as vulnerable. No one described him as emotional. No one described him as angry. He was neutral. And sometimes, neutrality hides things. There was one name that came up repeatedly during interviews. Evan Mercer, 34, junior architect, worked under Daniel for 3 years. Professional, reserved, quiet. At first glance, Evan seemed like a non-factor. But when detectives dug deeper, a subtle tension emerged. 2 months before Daniel's death, a major promotion opened up at the firm. Daniel got it. Evan didn't. And according to one anonymous co-worker, Evan didn't take it well. Not publicly. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. He just withdrew. Stopped attending optional meetings. Began working alone. Requested a schedule change. Was it enough for murder? Probably not. But in a case with no suspects, probably not, becomes worth examining. When detectives interviewed Evan, something about the interaction lingered, not because he said anything incriminating, but because of what he didn't say. He didn't ask how Daniel died. He didn't ask for details. He didn't seem shocked. He described Daniel as predictable. That word again. Predictable. When asked about the night of October 14th, Evan provided an alibi. He was home, alone, working on freelance designs, no witnesses, no camera footage, no digital timestamps strong enough to confirm activity. Just his words. And that's where it stopped. Because suspicion is not evidence, and instinct is not proof. Months into the investigation, a forensic tech revisited Daniel's security system logs, looking for something they might have overlooked. There were no break-ins, no tampering. But there was something else. At 7:03 p.m., the alarm system had been disarmed. using the correct code, and at 7:19 p.m. it was rearmed, using the correct code. Daniel arrived home at 6:47 p.m., so the timeline suggests he entered, disarmed the system, put down groceries, and then, at 7:03 p.m., someone disarmed it again, meaning someone else may have arrived, and Daniel either let them in or gave them the code previously. When detectives asked Rebecca if anyone else knew the code, she hesitated. Then she said something that shifted everything. Daniel once mentioned giving his alarm code to someone from work, in case of emergencies. From work. That narrowed the circle dramatically. Detectives brought Evan back in. This time they asked directly, "Did Daniel ever share his security code with you?" Evan paused, longer than expected, then said, "Yes, once, a year ago, after a minor office break-in incident." Daniel had told him, "If anything ever happens and you can't reach me, you know how to get in." It sounded innocent, practical, professional. But when asked why the system was disarmed at 7:03 p.m., Evan's breathing reportedly changed, subtle, faster. He denied being there, denied visiting, denied any contact that evening. And again, there was no evidence placing him at the scene. No fingerprints, no DNA, no shoe prints, nothing in his car, nothing in his apartment, no weapon, no trace. If he did it, he left nothing. Investigators consulted a behavioral analyst. Here's what stood out. Single, precise wound. No overkill, no rage, no theft, no staging. That suggests control, familiarity, calm. The killer didn't panic. They weren't improvising. They weren't emotional in the traditional sense. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a decision, which makes it more unsettling, because decisions imply planning, and planning implies intent long before the act itself. Despite suspicion, there was no direct evidence, no timeline confirmation, no digital proof, no surveillance footage, no witnesses placing Evan in the neighborhood. Cell tower data placed his phone at home, and without physical evidence, the case couldn't move forward. The district attorney refused to file charges. The investigation stalled, and eventually, it went cold. Officially. Years later, detectives still revisit the file, because one question refuses to disappear. If Daniel let someone into his house, who did he trust that much? The door wasn't forced. The system was disarmed properly. There were no defensive wounds, which means Daniel likely didn't see it coming. And people rarely feel threatened by strangers in their own living room, but they relax around people they know. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Daniel Holloway's case remains open. No suspects, no arrests, no charges, just a clean crime scene, a disarmed alarm, and a man who trusted someone enough to let them inside. Some investigators believe they know who did it. They just can't prove it. And that may be the most haunting part. Because sometimes justice doesn't fail because we don't know. It fails because knowing isn't enough. And somewhere out there, someone remembers that night. Someone remembers standing in that living room. Someone remembers leaving without a trace. And they've lived with it every single day.